Hey guys, it's Misery here, and today I'd like to take a look at Curios, which is kind of fitting because I don't think anyone has looked at Curios in like 2 years, devs included. This is sort of a system that I believe fell through the cracks somewhere along the line in the dev cycle, and it's not the most important thing in the world. It's definitely not a high priority, but it is in need of a bit of a rework, a touch-up. If you go and look at Melk's shop, where you can buy random curios, it says buy defensive curios, which would spark the question, well, where's offensive curios? Where's utility curios? And I think that more curios and more variety could add additional depth to the game and its class building systems. So I'm all for that. But we have what we have for now and for the foreseeable future. So let's lay out what the best possible setups for these curios are for each of the 5 classes. Let's explain first what you're actually looking at here. This is a spreadsheet that shows you what the best curios and curio perks are for each of the 5 classes. It is available for copy or download or whatever down in the description. And on the way down to the description, why not subscribe to the channel? If you love Darktide, if you love commentary and good information about it, this is a great channel for you. And with that being said, let's talk about what you're going to look at on this y-axis over here. We have the main stat combos on the left here. Sorry, I'm trying to find my mouse. The main stat combos on the left here, this is going to tell you what the header stats should be. So your choices here are stamina, +3 stamina is the maximum. You could also get 17% toughness, up to 17% toughness, up to 21% health, or you can get up to +1 wounds. So those are your 4 choices there. For perks, this is all the things that go below that. You can choose 3 perks on any curio, and we'll come back and talk about this in a second with this blue stuff in the top left corner, but some of these lose effectiveness as you choose more of the same one. So we'll come back and touch on that in a second. Let's first go ahead and start talking about the Arbites and what he likes on curios and why. First of all, he really likes toughness. This would be like the standard build on Arbites, is just 3 times toughnesses. Arbites has a ton of ways of regenerating toughness, and since toughness regeneration in this game is almost exclusively percentage based, if you have a higher pool of toughness, every attack or every instance you do where you regenerate some toughness, it's going to give you more as a flat number, which means the enemies are going to have a much harder time breaking it, which means you're going to have more effective health. And he is very tanky, so we want to take that as far as possible. Now, you could, if you are a pro, choose 3 times HP curios on Arbites. And this is an interaction with one specific talent called True Grit on his talent tree that makes it so that you cannot take more than 50 HP damage from any given attack. So if you are a very skilled player and the only way that you are taking damage is to critical, flubs where like a crusher overhead nicks you or a sniper shot lines up on you or a burster or something like that, this can extend the amount of attacks that you can take, otherwise fatal attacks that you can take by a big factor, by like I think 2 times, because it boosts your health by 63%. So that could be really vital if you are a very skilled player and the only way that you're taking damage is to these catastrophic fuck-ups. But I don't think that this is generally advisable. I just know that it is a sort of a thing I've seen some very high skilled players do, and that's why they might be doing it. But for 99.9% of players, stick to 3 times toughness here. I also want to mention before I go on to Ogren, the reason we are not using any stamina curios on the Arbites is because his stamina regeneration rate and his stamina regeneration delay are very fast. He doesn't have to wait very long to start getting the stamina back, and his pool is good enough for his stamina that he doesn't really have to worry about bringing any extra. So that is why you're not seeing any stamina there. You'll see that as compared to another class in a second. Okay, now we have the Ogren. The Ogren is very similar. He does like 3 times toughnesses. If you are not going for a melee focused build that utilizes pushing or blocking, just go ahead and bring your 3 times toughness. Ogren, when he is swinging his pulley club or his pickaxe or whatever, he can't be sprinting or whatever, so he just walks around, and that means his toughness is going to be more utilized than his stamina. You could also do 2 times toughness and 1 stamina. 2 times toughness and 1 stamina is probably the slightly more optimal setup on Havoc, for instance, because toughness as a whole is reduced when you are in high Havoc difficulty. So bringing more toughness in your Curios doesn't really effectively give you a whole lot because it's reduced by a good number. So you'll get less reward on Havoc out of bringing that toughness, and you get more reward out of bringing the stamina. The Ogryn has a very, very high consumption of stamina rate on all of his weapons because they're so heavy. So he likes to have some additional stamina, just so he can make certain that when he gets into an engagement, he still has enough to push and whatever with. And he also has a few talents, or at least one talent I can think of, that gives him damage reduction when he's over a certain percentage of stamina, which means that having a bigger pool, therefore it's easier to stay in that top percentage is what I'm saying. So that's what you want to do with the main stats for Ogryns. For Psykers actually have the most similarity to Arbites here, and this is where I'm going to come back and touch on why Arbites doesn't need stamina. So Psyker has the same or very similar regeneration stats for stamina as the Arbites does. He gets his stamina back starting after a 0.5 second delay, so that's the shortest in the game. And that means that what you can do with the Psyker is you can chain stab with the dueling sword or the knife or whatever, and you can slide along the ground, and you can regenerate in the interim while you're sliding. So you can, if you've ever seen a Psyker like chain stabbing forever, that's what they're doing. So the Arbites has a similar cooldown on the regeneration of stamina, but he has a much higher overall pool of stamina. The Psyker only has 2 stamina as a base, and many of his weapons do not bring very much extra, so it's nice to bring a stamina curio here. You could either do 3 toughnesses if you plan on mainly sticking to like staff play or something like that, but if you're getting into melee at all, I would probably do 2 toughness and 1 stamina. That way your pool of stamina goes from like 3 to 6. That's a big increase, and it's going to give you a lot more to work with in terms of sprinting and moving around and pushing and all that stuff. You never know when you might need it, and of course blocking is also pretty decent on the Psyker. Then we got to move on to Veteran and Zealot, the classic old boys. They are just going to use the classic same thing as Psyker here. 3 times toughness is a pretty solid choice, or you can choose 2 times toughness and 1 time stamina. I think that probably the 2 times toughness, 1 time stamina is where I prefer. The Zealot doesn't struggle with the what's it called? Stamina problems that the Veteran has quite as much. The Veteran has a much slower regeneration speed than the Zealot does, but they both like stamina because they're both pretty mobile classes that want to get in there. However, if you are doing a mainly range-focused Veteran, you'll probably just want to stick to that toughness. If you, I think most Zealots are going to want to have at least 1 stamina curio in there because Zealots are just, by their nature, need to be so mobile. So, but 3 times toughness is fine too, because you do get a lot of base toughness or base stamina as Zealot. So that's our main stats down. Let's pivot on down and talk about the perks that are associated and how to pick them. Okay, let's begin talking about some of these perks down here. Now, perks are very curious because you get less effect out of taking certain perks repeatedly than you do others. So, for instance, for all damage reduction perks, if you take more than 1, you're going to lose effectiveness as compared to what it advertises on paper. With the gunner damage resistance statistic, which I see a lot of newer players stacking, it's pretty good, honestly, so good job to figure that out. But players think that it's going to give them 3 sets of 20% damage resistance, which means a total of 60% damage resistance, right? But if you look in the top left corner, this is the actual calculation. It's multiplicative. So what happens is you have a certain amount of damage coming in, and then you cut that by 20%, and then you cut it again by 20%, and then you cut it again by 20%. And since you're doing it to the remaining damage each time, you actually lose effectiveness here. So after having 3 Curios of 20% damage reduction, you'll actually end up at only 48.8% damage reduction instead of 60, which means you're losing almost 12% damage reduction as compared to what is advertised, which means that honestly, there's a pretty good argument to be made to swap away and pick something else instead of Gunner DR. But that's something we'll cover as we go through each class individually. I want to first start by talking about RBs and start by talking about the things that we will see on every single one of these builds because they are just that strong, which is ability cooldown and revive speed. Ability cooldown is really, really top tier. It's one of the only offensive things you can get on these so-called defensive Curios. Having a faster cooldown on your ability is absolutely essential in Darktide, especially if you are a class that can otherwise boost your cooldown as well, because what you're doing is you're cutting the base cooldown. So for a Zealot, for instance, who has a 1 minute cooldown on Chorus, which is one of the best examples of a place to use this, this cooldown reduction. If you take these cooldown reduction Curios, you're going to cut the cooldown by 7 seconds right off the bat, because you get 12% off if you take all 3 of these, which I generally always do. So you're taking 7 seconds off of that, and then remember that Zealot has Invocation of Death, which can triple your cooldown rate, so you would divide the remaining amount of seconds by 3, and it would only take you 17 seconds to get this cooldown back up, which would be awesome. So we really, really want to cut our cooldown whenever possible. There obviously are some skills that do not require as much as others. So if you're playing Zealot and you're going Fury of the Faithful, which has a 30-second cooldown, an additional 12% is probably not going to make a huge world of difference to you. Same thing with Hold the Line, I believe it's called, or the charge ability on RBs with a 20-second cooldown. It'll cut your cooldown to 17.6% or so, but you know, you're only cutting like 2.5 seconds off. So if you don't really care about those seconds, you go for something else. But there really aren't a whole lot of options on Curios, which is kind of sad. So I think this is a great auto include. The second auto include is Revive Speed. Revive Speed is one of those you don't know you need it until you need it sort of things, especially if you are tackling Havoc. Keep an eye out, by the way, for a how to get into and tackle Havoc series. You will need Revive Speed at some point or another. Players are going to get downed, and it's just so coincidental that you don't have quite enough time to get a revive in most situations, but if you have 36% additional revive speed, you absolutely do, because they recently buffed this revive speed for whatever reason. I mean, I guess it's good now. It's always been pretty good, but now it actually goes to 12%, so you can have up to 36% revive speed, and that means you pick up allies pretty dang fast, and that can make the difference between being able to get a revive and not get one. And the very important synergy here is that a lot of stun and stagger effects, such as Veteran Shout, you know, if you're playing a veteran, never take the node that says, okay, get your ally back up, but add 50% cooldown with your shout. Just take revive speed on your Curios and then shout and pick people up while everything is staggered around you. This also means that you have enough time during like a slight knockback, or if a mutant dodges, or you dodge a mutant, you can get a pickup while he's still turning around to charge. It makes a world of difference, and you won't feel it until you really, really need it that one time. So I definitely recommend that on all 3 Curios. And then the third one for Arbites, I think, is gotta be Gunner Damage Reduction. That's probably the best other one he can choose. Arbites is such a tanky boy. He really only gets his toughness broken by consistent, sustained fire from these gunner targets. And just to specify here, when the game says gunners, this is only machine gunners, like the guys who have the backpack and go prrr, and the Reapers. That's it. There's no, the small scab shooters, those are shooters, those don't count, and snipers don't count, and what else? Shotgunners, even though they have gunners in the name, those are not also gunners. So it's only Reapers and the machine gunners. But those enemies are very scary, and they account for a lot of damage that goes into you, because they're one of the only classes that can actually like lock onto you and hit you consistently as you're trying to regenerate. And with a little bit of extra gunner DR on the RPDs, you can out-sustain even their damage and just beat them up. And it trivializes lower difficulties, because they're like one of the best DPSers on lower difficulties. So if you get rid of them, you're golden, baby. Okay, let's talk about Ogren. Or let's go all the way down. Let's go vertical first. The okay perks on RBDs would be Bomber Damage Reduction. Bomber Damage Reduction is pretty okay on all classes, specifically for, well, I guess both are fine. Sometimes Flame Bombs are kind of annoying, but mostly Gas Bombs are annoying. The reason I'm putting it on okay on RBDs is because sometimes you won't choose Rebreather. If you choose Rebreather, you can just skip it. You don't need it, because Rebreather will just do this for you. It'll make you have way more gas damage resistance, and you can just sniff that all day. The Bomber Damage Resistance, though, it's really, really solid on most classes for that gas damage resistance. You'll notice the difference in how much it chunks your toughness when you're standing in it and corrupts your health. So it can allow you to linger in there for twice as long if you really need to, which sometimes you absolutely do. For other okay perks, toughness is also okay. As said previously, toughness is a diminishing return when you are talking about going into Havoc, because Havoc cuts your base toughness. So 5% toughness added to a Curio is going to give you like literally like 3 toughness. So it's probably not all that big a deal. It'll be more of a big deal on lower difficulties, but I just think you should get used to playing without that tiny bit of extra toughness and go on for more juicy stuff. Block efficiency, also pretty okay on him, because he is a class that does some blocking. You know, if you're going for the shield build and you want to block some gunners and walk into the line of fire, block efficiency, baby. That can be one setup where you would choose block efficiency as the third talent on all your Curios. Be pretty solid, so I can recommend it for that. And stamina regen is also okay on our BDs, because, you know, he does use a good bit of stamina running around. He has a pretty fast start to his regeneration, and what this does is multiplies the regeneration that you get after that fast start. So he'll be able to sustain a higher stamina more often, which means he can sprint more often, but it's not generally absolutely necessary. And then finally, bad perks are everything else. So yeah, that's just everything else on the list. There's a huge long list of these perk things. You know, it includes silly stuff like extra chance to win a curio when you win a mission, and like 10% extra credits or whatever. This stuff is just junk. It seems like it was something that they threw in at the last second because they're like, oh, we can't think of anything else to put in these curios. Let's give them these sort of things they can choose from as well. So yeah, just don't choose that stuff personally, unless you're like leveling your character and you need XP and money or something. Ogryn, let's go on to Ogryn. Ogryn is going to be benefited from the same stuff as Arbides. Arbides is a mini Ogryn in many ways. He likes ability cooldown, especially if you are using Taunt, because Taunt has a 45-second base cooldown, and that means that you're going to have a, like a 40-ish second cooldown off the back of that with all 3 stamina, or all 3 cooldown reduction Curios, and then, of course, his good augment, well, both of his augments on and Taunt are really good, but one of them can lower that by a percentage even further, so you'll have to get even less staggers to get this thing back up, so you'll be cooking in no time with another Taunt up. It also is just really effective for his well, you know, you don't really use Point Blank Barrage, but Charge is pretty good with it too. But I'd say mostly it's for getting those taunts up, because taunts are just super effective ultimate. Revive speed, again, here is super clutch. Ogryn is one of the unique classes in that he can get a revive no matter what, unless he gets fully bodily, like, stagger, like, thrown out of the way. Because he can just ignore the fact that he's taking health damage while interacting with things, including getting people up, so he can commit to the res and trade health for picking someone up, and that means the faster he picks him up, the less health damage he has to take. And yeah, so he can also taunt, and in that interim, where everything around him is staggered, get the pickup, which is pretty nice. Gunner damage reduction, also a very solid thing on him because he's such a large target, and he has a really hard time shaking targets or gunners once they lock onto him because he is so large. So putting Gunner DR in here allows you just to weather the blows and walk into the enemy and start beating them down. I think it's like genuinely a lifesaver on so many of my runs. And when you get into Havoc, because Gunners do so much more damage and you have so much less health, the Gunner DR starts to be a huge contributor to your overall survivability, and it's going to allow you to go brain off mode, which is how we should all be playing Ogryn much more often. For OK perks, similar to the RBDs, but sprint efficiency on here as well as the block efficiency. He's also a blocker from time to time with if you're going shield or whatever, so that's why I put it on there. But sprint efficiency is kind of nice on Ogryn because Ogryn eats stamina for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and second breakfast when he's sprinting. If you sprint 1 meter, you're just gassed as Ogryn, and you don't ever really want to go into a combat being out of stamina because you can't shove and you can't block, so that's a bad time, and you're also losing your damage reduction that you should have talented in your tree, so you want to make certain that stamina is staying nice and high, and therefore sprint efficiency would be a pretty okay pickup for a third perk on here, and then everything else is pretty bad. Psyker is a little bit different than these last two. He likes ability cooldown, he likes revive speed, and he likes stamina regen. So stamina regen is going to enable him, as we said before, he and Arbides have really short cooldown on when they start to regenerate stamina, but Psyker has a really small pool for his stamina. So it's nice for Psyker to have a little bit of stamina regen on here because he can regenerate a good bit more, 36% more of his stamina while he's doing his little slidey thing around. And that actually keeps him with enough sustain so he can chain stab forever. He can just slide and chain stab and chain stab and slide and just keep that movement speed, that 20% movement speed-ish buff up ad nauseum, which is very, very solid. He also likes bomber damage reduction. This is an okay perk on him, as well as toughness down here. But remember, that's going to be reduced in effectiveness as you get into higher havocs. Note that I'm not putting gunner DR on him because I think he is evasive enough that he can avoid most gunner damage reduction, or most gunner damage. And he also has things like bubble that just negate gunner damage, so he probably doesn't need to have a whole lot of toughness to that. If you're getting shot by a gunner for more than like 1 millisecond on this class, you're dead anyway. So having an additional 50% DR to him is going to make you dead in 2 milliseconds. And then, of course, block efficiency on the Psyker. The Psyker is unique in that he can block ranged attacks if you're using Warp Sword, which is a pretty cool interaction. He can also he also kind of just is generally a class that needs to make space a lot, and so Psykers can maneuver themselves around enemies while blocking and just fend off a ton of attacks and wait until they have an opportunity to get a Void Blast or a Flame Staff like Gout in to get some damage done. So block efficiency can be pretty good on Psykers. They're a very frail class, so any actual defenses they can get is pretty nice. Veteran likes ability cooldown, revive speed, and stamina regeneration as well. He really needs the stamina regeneration. Veterans are not getting the cardio training they used to back in my day. They seem to get themselves gassed in like under 2 seconds, and it's very hard for them to regenerate their stamina because they have a long delay without it being talented in their tree to reduce the delay, and then their regeneration speed is a lot slower than other classes as well. So this will boost their regeneration speed such that they can get some stamina back up, which is going to be important. You do need to push and you do need to block in this game from time to time. It also helps if you are going like Deadshot or something that consumes stamina as you fire. That's kind of a meme build, but hey, you might be using it. In that case, definitely choose stamina regen. Revive speed, by the way, here, insane on veteran because we all know what you're using. You're using shout, and with shout, you have enough time when you shout to revive someone if you take revive speed before enemies can attack you, which is awesome. For OK perks, Gunner DR is on here again. We are a ranger, so we don't have any defenses of our own. We don't have a bubble or anything, but we can just trade shots at long range with gunners like this. We can take a little bit of hits from them, and we can deliver hits back that are going to kill them. And so that's why we have this on here. It allows our passive regeneration from Catch Your Breath, I believe it's called, to regenerate and keep us topped off while we're tanking gunner shots, which is pretty nice. Bomber DR, also nice. Toughness, also nice. Everything else, not so nice. Oh, I forgot to fill in this bottom thing down here. Let's go ahead and do that while I'm here. All right, and then Zealot, finally. Zealot also thrives on the same things. Revive speed, absolutely clutch, right? You can get that revive right off the back of a chorus or during Shroud Field and have time to spare, or after a good charge. Ability cooldown, absolutely key, especially you're probably going chorus these days with Zealot. Ability cooldown it's the most effective talent, or most effective ability in the game for ability cooldown, and it's absolutely massive for it, so really, really good there. And stamina regen for him as well. Zealot has a big pool of stamina. He doesn't start regenerating it quite as quickly as some of the other classes, but he utilizes it way more than other classes because he is constantly pushing and using his push stab attacks. If you've ever played Zealot with the Crusher, you need to be using your push stab attack to get any efficient damage done. So that's going to use a ton of stamina, and yeah, he also loves to sprint. Like, he's so mobile, he's so fast, so you'll see me sprinting around, and you can actually use your entire juice bar of stamina by just playing normal, even when we have a ton of stamina regeneration. So it's good to have it extended as much as possible. And then we also like Gunner DR, Toughness, and Bomber DR down here. This does general things. There's annoying enemies that can blow you up in a second. Gunner DR can be particularly effective on the Zealot because, again, these are one of the only enemies that can deal damage sufficient to break through the toughness of some of these really, really tanky boys, and Zealot is a really, really tanky boy. So let's tune down the one type of enemy that can pose a threat to us at all by taking some DR to them. And that's the whole grid, guys. I did put some sort of notes down here at the bottom in case players are, skipping all of my explanations and just coming straight to this, or see this in the future for some reason, it gets passed out. Why am I not taking wounds on any Curios? Outside of Martyrdom, a lot of newer players do take wounds because they are scared of the potentiality of being downed, and they don't want to, be dead the next time they go down. So they take wounds, and wounds are actually really bad because they deprive you of taking defensive stats, which is going to make you more likely to take those downs. And I feel like you aren't probably learning the game properly if you're getting down like enough where you need to start taking extra lives into the combat. The lower difficulties already have an additional down, so you don't have to. You have 3 downs on anything below damnation, right? So, or below heresy, whatever it is. So you don't really have to worry about that so much at lower difficulties. I would never bring wounds outside of Martyrdom, and even then, yeah, it's just kind of a bait. Why don't I think 3 times? Oh, let's talk about spreading out the damage reduction, or what I would optimally choose. My optimal choice for a Curio would probably be something like, let's say for RPDs, for example, I would choose 3 times toughness. I would choose 3 times ability cooldown. I would choose 3 times revive speed, and then I would choose 2 gunner damage reduction, and then 1 maybe bomber damage reduction or block efficiency or something else, right? The reason I'm not choosing 3 is because you're only getting about 12% off of that last one that you get. You can take 3. It wouldn't hurt. It's 12% damage reduction against gunners, but wouldn't you rather have 20% damage reduction against bombers? Doesn't that kind of like level out? Or wouldn't you rather have 15% block efficiency or something like that? So you just got to kind of weigh those options, because you're going to get less out of each of the same type of damage reduction that you take. Don't stack 3 of the same type, would be my general wisdom. You can diversify and get more perks out of it that way. But I think that most people should be taking 3 combat ability reduction, and then just spam those abilities, guys. Spam them. They should be always going off, right? Abilities are so strong, you don't get anything out of them if you're just sitting on them. And then 3 revive speeds. If everybody had revive speed, the world would be a better place. And then why not take HP? So HP has been left out of here pretty much. Toughness is way better than HP, is the truth of the matter. Toughness is regenerated by almost every effect in the game as a percentage of your hull. So when you have a higher base toughness, every percentage that you regenerate is more flat toughness, which means that enemies who aren't dealing a percentage but are instead dealing a flat amount of toughness, they are going to have to do more work to get through that toughness now, because you just extended your effective toughness by 60%, and therefore all your regenerative effects have been extended by 60%. And that makes their lives like, 60% harder at least. And therefore, as I said down here, more toughness equals faster regen equals more effective HP. So any amount of HP, even if you're an HP based class like the Ogre, any amount of HP that you would get is going to ultimately be dwarfed by the amount of toughness that you're going to regenerate over the course of a game, because your toughness can replenish and replenish and replenish and over and over and over again. And so you'll take thousands upon thousands of toughness damage over the course of a game, but you can only take a certain maximal amount of health damage before you die ultimately. So that's the whole look at it, guys. I hope this was helpful. The Curios are in a curious place, and maybe we'll see some changes to them in sometime in the future. But for now, I think this is a great setup. Remember to check the description for the link to this if you want to grab it for yourself. Share it with your friends. Like the video, comment, subscribe. I love y'all. See you soon. Mystery out. Bye.